Paralogue 3, Surprise Duet. Azura's son, Shigure, arrives wounded to the ship that they are traveling on. The enemies pursuing Shigure catch up to the ship and attack. Can I just say, I hate that sentence. Azura's son, Shigure, arrives wounded to the ship that they are traveling on. Who's they? Azura is definitely a she and Shigure is a he, so is it both of them?
We've got trouble.
Shigure arrives to the ship that Azura and Shigure are traveling on? What?
Huh?
Mother.
Oh my. What's that? Shigure. My apologies.
Come again?
Well. Shigure.
Mother.
Trust me.
It's just...
Listen.
No.
Bizarrely, despite all indications, Shigure does not participate in this battle. Go figure.
We won't lose.
I'm with you all the way.
Anyway, welcome to boat map number 2. In this mission, our forces are scattered around our flagship in the center of the stage. We're flanked by 2 slightly smaller ships, each of which has been taken over by Valite forces. During preparations, our ship is disconnected from the other 2, and so it appears that there's no way to cross except by flying. But that's not actually how this map works. Every turn, all 3 ships will move. The enemy ships will take turns pulling up alongside ours. We'll first dock with the one on our starboard side, then the one to port, then back to starboard with a different docking position, and then back to port, also with a new position. After that, we repeat from the beginning. So there's a 4-turn cycle that runs until the mission ends. That happens whenever we kill the boss, which is something we could do immediately. Easy win conditions are a common feature among the 5 paralogs that are accessible in both Birthright and Conquest, this being our first of those. If you're just doing them to recruit children, these maps hardly put up any resistance. But that's because the real reward from these missions is a colossal amount of experience. In the paralogs that aren't shared with Birthright, aside from maybe the bosses, enemies are never leveled higher than the standard for the upcoming story chapter. In fact, they're often 1 level lower. But in these paralogs, even the basic flunkies are at least at par, and several enemies who aren't even bosses are overleveled by 6. I'll refer to these as elites or captains. Because of them, these shared paralogs make it possible to train your units far beyond the intended level curve. If that's what you're going for, and in our case it certainly is, the defeat the boss objective is a huge hindrance. He's not hard to kill, but we don't want to do that until we've taken out all of the reinforcements, and those don't stop until after turn 20. If he was stationary, that would be fine. Unfortunately, the boss can move, and he doesn't only activate when our units are in his attack range. He can also start moving in order to heal wounded teammates with his physics staff. We'll have to play around that. It's worth noting that these shared paralogs do not follow Conquest's AI rules, so enemies are willing to attack even if they won't deal any damage. Also, as is typical for Birthright or Revelation maps, enemy skills are rare. Even the boss has none. Beware though that a lack of skills doesn't make the enemies trivial. Sorcerers and Berserkers still pack a punch with their stats alone. In the context of this challenge run, it's really difficult to plan this mission. We have to make a lot of decisions about how to distribute experience. The slow pace of reinforcements makes that process even harder because there's not a very natural flow to the battle that shapes what we have to do from turn to turn. And those decisions matter. We have to consider the needs of characters like Xander, who will continue to see use a lot later in the campaign, but we have to balance those against the more immediate needs of people like Baruka and Kaze, who are trying to finish their training. Speaking of Kaze, his friendship with Silas enables him to become a paladin. Paladin is a substantial downgrade from Master Ninja in most respects, but importantly, it offers a much better suite of skills for his kid to inherit.
Let's see.
This mission also marks the return of Perry. She becomes a paladin too, since she wants to pass Defender down to her future kid. Oh, and lest we forget, we have a newcomer. Actually, she's been in the army for a little while, but this is the first time we're deploying her. Flora is Felicia's twin sister. Like Felicia, she's a maid with access to the mercenary class tree. Unlike Felicia, she has no special leveling mechanics, and she has no supports with anyone other than her sister or Corrin. In exchange, she gets a third class, Dark Mage. Technically, that's her second class, which is why Flora can pass it to Felicia with friendship. As a unit, Flora has some nice features. She comes with at least B rank in staves, along with C and daggers. The staff rank is enough to use in Trap, a powerful tool that can help quite a bit in the last few chapters of Conquest. That utility can be very important, especially if you didn't have your first servant or release do a lot of healing early on to reach B rank the hard way. And her excellent skill stat makes her very accurate with offensive staves. That shouldn't be overlooked. You can totally replicate that functionality with a captured enemy maid, though. One way that Flora is noticeably better than generic maids is in combat. Daggers are great weapons that Flora can wield using either her decent magic stat or her surprisingly good strength. She even pairs those mixed attacking stats with high resistance and workable physical defense. That said, Flora's glaring flaw is her speed. She has the same base and growth as Paladin Xander, and that's in a class that is innately faster than Paladin. Unfortunately, her other stats are nowhere near as good as Xander's. They're much more like Kaze's. That makes her basically Kaze, but slow. Sometimes that's all you need, but mostly it's disappointing. There's one other thing Flora has that generics don't. A personal skill, Icy Blood. Sadly, it's another conditional variant of Counter like Nyx's personal skill, with a ridiculously limited condition, but with a bonus debuff effect to compensate. Basically, it's useless. However, spoiler alert, it does kind of matter in this mission. Not in a good way, really, but that's how it goes with these kinds of skills. So Flora's value proposition is being able to use all the important staves without training, while also fighting competently against slower, mage, and sometimes beast-type enemies. Although if you really try, you can make her do everything Kaze can do. And potentially giving Dark Mage to Felicia as a bonus. In a normal playthrough, that wouldn't be too impressive. But we just destroyed our Kaze, and we're about to fight a whole bunch of sorcerers, so welcome to the team, Flora. We'll finish our preparations by pairing Mozu with Kaze. After that, we're set. We paired Mozu and Kaze during preps just to have a slightly better proc chance for Profiteer. When Kaze drops Mozu, he ends her turn without giving her a chance to execute any actions on her own. That means Azura is able to refresh Mozu and apply a +3 luck buff before Mozu uses up her one chance to activate Profiteer on this turn. Mozu uses that chance while standing at the starboard side of our ship, just beyond the reach of the Berserkers but in range of an adventurer to the north who can attack her with a bow.
I'm here to help.
We're going to do a lot of shelter singing on this mission. That's partly for the immediate tactical benefits, but really we're doing it to grind experience for Azura. Since Shigure doesn't join until after this battle is over, whatever levels Azura gains before then may translate into additional stat inheritance for him, particularly in Azura's best stats: strength, skill, speed, and luck.
No quarter.
Our frontliners are now in position to fight the two nearest Berserker. Benny and Corrin have a pre-existing support rank, so Benny's defense stat will be augmented by Corrin's supportive skill, making it higher than Xander's. Nevertheless, because Benny gets doubled and faces weapon triangle disadvantage, Xander's the one the enemies will ignore. We can use Parry to shelter Sing again. Alas, we need to reposition Parry to have her in the right place for this enemy phase, so Azura has to sing to her instead of someone else at a higher level who could give Azura more experience.
You're homeless without me.
Wow, look at me.
Have no fear. My turn.
We'll take down these two Berserkers before we worry about the other ship at our port side. Benny goes first, using Parry support to weaken the forwardmost enemy. Benny won't need a javelin ever again on this mission, so Parry takes it now.
I'll support you. Here I come.
We're going to feed a lot of experience to Baruka. This is her last mission, and we want her to reach level 15 to learn Trample. She's effectively 4 levels lower than displayed because we promoted her at just level 13. That means she can still earn reasonable experience from the non-elite level 6 enemies, but only for now. Those experience gains will die off fast as she gains more levels.
Don't interfere.
Charlotte wants to finish her A support with Baruka, but she should also devote some time to her boyfriend, the Crown Prince. Like Parry, she can use a magic weapon to temper damage output.
I'm with you.
Kaze can now steal the kill, and he even gets to lead the finishing blow from Mozu's dual strike. That allows Mozu to level up before she acts on this turn, which again marginally improves her probability of generating extra gold for us. Leveling up at the same time, Kaze gets his first and arguably best skill from the Cavalier line, Elbow Room. That's the one we'll want him to pass down to his daughter. Now let's look at the sorcerers. We'd like to keep most of them on their ship, allowing only 1 or 2 to cross onto ours. We can do that using these partition tiles, which allow us to use the sorcerer's ranged attack capabilities against them.
I believe in you.
Corrin gets into position first, and he equips the Horse Spirit to improve his resistance.
We've got this. All right.
Felicia would use Mend on Corrin now to patch him up, but he managed to avoid all damage last turn. For the sake of keeping our experience on track, Felicia opts to mend Azura instead.
Be careful. Here we go.
No quarter.
Xander comes over to shelter Azura, and he equips his javelin on the way. He'll need that in order to counterattack the sorcerers.
We can do this together.
Felicia pulls Azura to let her sing to Xander. After that, Flora can move down to take and drop Felicia. The twins have a fast support with each other, so in the absence of any other support ranks, Flora will prefer to use Felicia's dual strikes. At the aft end of this formation, Xander and Corrin have a similar relationship. The fast support between them guarantees that Corrin will use Xander's dual strike rather than Flora's. Before Xander moves into the proper position, we have one last small optimization. We can give both Keaton and Mozu a chance to trigger their respective luck-based resource-generating skills by having Keaton pass Mozu over to Xander, then using Mozu to drop Xander at his destination. She also equips the Blessed Lance for some extra healing. The first attack from the enemy is aimed at Flora. That's what we want, but I should note that the AI decisions here are somewhat sensitive to the exact stats of the characters involved, other than Flora, of course, who is brand new and has never leveled up. That's why Corrin had to use the Horse Spirit instead of something that can't crit, like Fire. Also, Xander would be doubled, and therefore targeted first, because the Javelin's affect a speed penalty if it weren't for the speed boost from Azura's inspiring song.
I'm here to help. I can help too!
I see.
No holding back. So stubborn.
Only one sorcerer actually boards us. Luckily, that behavior is consistent. This is one of the level 12 captains. We'll have Flora beat him up first.
Right.
She can use him to build support with Felicia and Corrin both.
We can do this together. Me too!
Since they've dual struck for each other thrice, Flora and Felicia have already done enough to secure their C support. With that wrapped up, Felicia is free to go elsewhere. She heals Corrin, for real this time.
Here I am.
Corrin comes over to weaken the sorcerer again.
I won't lose. Me too. How troubling.
And Azura sings to Flora, who can now attack the sorcerer one more time. But we want
This is
Baruka to
my
take this
mission.
kill. For that to happen, Flora has to get out of the
Watch
way,
out for you.
which she can do by moving forward of Corrin.
I'm with you. Let me try.
Gotta eliminate it.
We've weakened the sorcerer so much that we can kill using Corrin's dual strike alone.
We won't give up. Need a hand?
You took my target.
The next threat to address is the pair of berserkers approaching from our starboard side. The one at the stern is an elite. We'll want to pull him onto our ship in order to avoid attracting other enemies who aren't active yet. We can do that at range because he carries a hand axe. The other active berserker, amidships, can't move far enough to board our boat. He can only head either fore or aft. Fore is much better for us because that will isolate him. That's why Charlotte stands near the end of his range.
Let's share this one.
Perry shelters Azura, who can then sing to
I'll
Felicia.
protect you.
We've got this.
That lets Felicia heal Xander as well. Kaze puts himself in position to dual strike against the elite berserker after he comes over.
No quarter.
And Xander gives Mozu a rout.
Don't do anything dumb.
The higher level adventurer on the southern ship starts moving in order to cast Physic on his ally. That's something the boss on the northern ship can do too, but that pathfinding behavior only happens when an individual enemy's AI has switched from attack mode to retreat mode. That's why the boss didn't try to heal the berserker who just fought Mozu. The berserker hasn't retreated yet. now we face a whole line of sorcerers. We'll take half of them down on player phase, specifically the 3 on the right. The other 3 will survive a little longer so that their experience points can be funneled into the likes of Charlotte and Baruka. Flora and Corrin will face 2 of those together on enemy phase after she heals Corrin. Her Live to Serve skill can heal Flora too for the same amount. In this case, Corrin has lost enough HP that Flora will heal herself back to full. But if not, say if Corrin had dodged more attacks and didn't need so much healing, then Flora might still be wounded on enemy phase. That would put her personal skill in play. Icy Blood counters ranged attacks that hit Flora only when she's wounded.
I'll do my best.
That means the amount of damage Flora will deal varies depending on whether she's already hurt and on whether she actually gets hit or not. Getting extra damage could be helpful since Charlotte is going to help finish off the sorcerers, and she's a little below average in strength. Unfortunately, because we won't set up Icy Blood and we couldn't rely on it even if it were active, we'll have to make up for that strength deficit a different way. Corrin equips Fimbulfetter to go with Flora's Steel Shuriken when we'd really prefer to be using Fire and the Bronze Dagger, respectively.
I can support you. It's all right.
As you can see, even with the Steel Shuriken's small avoid penalty, enemy accuracy against Flora is pretty shaky. Now that Corrin is out of her way, Charlotte can join Baruka, who carries her astern before killing the level 12 Berserker. She relies entirely on Kaze's dual strike.
No hesitation. I won't allow.
Don't interfere.
Felicia is already in position to dual strike for parry. It's not crucial that we feed kills to parry right now, but because she's underleveled, she does get rewarded pretty handsomely.
I'm over here. Cool. What should we do?
Before attacking, Felicia makes Parry equip a Javelin. The Javelin gives Parry 1-2 range with weapon triangle advantage against tomes, and that will deter the surviving sorcerers from attacking her. Despite the fact that Felicia is just as underleveled as Parry is, we won't give her this next kill. She equips an Iron Dagger in order to leave it for Kaze, and conveniently, that drops the enemy hit rate to 0.
Let's go.
Kaze boards the southern ship, passes Charlotte off to Xander, and kills that sorcerer in one hit with a lance. In principle, we could try to get Xander's dual strike involved by giving Kaze a weaker weapon, but that's not too consistent because it's only possible if Kaze, Xander, and Parry are all weak enough. And there are other situations where they need to be strong. Regardless, using a lance is convenient. Having one equipped is necessary for AI manipulation, making the other sorcerers target someone other than Kaze. After borrowing Xander's Javelin, Mozu is able to weaken the sternmost sorcerer without killing him.
Admit it, you need me. Say to you.
Felicia's positioning prevents the other sorcerers from reaching Mozu because they have to go around her. Once we take out the one on the right, Mozu will be on a totally safe square. Xander too can reach safety by going north of Mozu. While there, he takes the Javelin back. Swapping Charlotte for Keaton is a goof, but luckily it's a harmless one. Azura is still available. She steps over to pass her general friend off to Baruka and then to Sing. That enables Baruka to take a second elite kill this turn, by the exact same method as before.
Must I restrain myself?
In this case, Baruka lunges, putting herself behind Kaze and thus in range of only one sorcerer. It's a good thing too, because judging by the damage this elite sorcerer is showing, she can only take one hit.
I am at your service. Allow me.
You took my target.
I'm with you. I'm here for you.
A displayed level of 13 makes Baruka actually level 29, and that's the territory where her experience earnings against the basic level 26 enemies really start to collapse. But killing 5 more level 32 elites would almost be enough to reach level 15, and even one additional kill of any kind would put her over the top.
Ready for this? Let me try!
We weren't punished by our suboptimal weapon selection. We didn't crit, and we didn't get crit. With that out of the way, the rest of the mission should be pretty smooth sailing, so to speak. Our obvious next task is to destroy the 2 sorcerers who just boarded our flagship, but we should also do something about the 1 survivor still on the southern ship, and we should work out a way to deal with the adventurers over there too. Mozu steps over near the closer sorcerer. She's not attacking, she's just delivering Charlotte to her destination.
If you die on me, I'll kill you.
Keaton comes along to take Charlotte clubbing.
If you die on me, I'll kill you.
Who's next?
Let's go.
Now Corrin can defeat the next sorcerer using Charlotte's dual strike. He'd prefer to get axe experience from this kill, and so he will. Keaton's parrot bonus to Charlotte makes that work. But there's more to consider. After Corrin kills the sorcerer, we'll want him to fight the berserker coming from the northern ship. That's the one we previously baited with Charlotte. For that, he should use the weakest weapon available, so he takes the unforged bronze axe. He can also go into the convoy and get his fire tome back. Now he lunges. That's crucial because it makes room for Azura.
Fragile for this. This is for you.
I can always count on you.
We can do this.
Once Azura sings to Corrin, he'll be able to go intercept the incoming berserker. Before she actually sings, she should pull Keaton. His parrot bonus is important again, not for Azura, but rather for Flora, who can now grab Keaton without having to move.
Let's go.
Corrin will be using Flora's
No holding
support.
back.
She can deal 6 damage by herself with a steel shuriken, or 3 in a dual strike, but we'd really prefer that she use the bronze dagger. Bronze has 5 less might, so that only deals 1 damage, and the dual strikes are worth 0. But if Flora can take Keaton, then she's able to deal damage and earn experience with her dual strike again.
No holding back.
Perry and Xander aren't needed on our flagship. They can go south. There, Perry and Felicia can again team up to fight a sorcerer, but they'll leave the kill for Baruka.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Me too! Let's see what you've got.
Kaze equips a sword for this dual strike. He wants sword experience more than lance, partly because it would be more useful to him if he were ever to go back to Master Ninja, but mostly because he wants to unlock a ranged weapon as soon as possible.
If I miss,
Don't interfere. Shall we?
Felicia has a chance to prepare her friend Perry for combat against an adventurer. In this situation, we want the two of them to deal very little damage, so Felicia should equip a physical weapon, and she should trade with Perry to make her hold the Levin sword. It's most useful to keep Xander unpaired, so Kaze takes and drops him, specifically to the right, keeping Xander on the ship, but not adjacent to Perry.
It's all right. I'll fight too. It'll be fine. Yes, I'm over here.
Flora has a chance to deal more chip damage while setting up a kill for Charlotte.
We won't give up. I can help
Let me help you.
Charlotte has 0 base magic and a 0% growth in magic, so her bolt axe always hits for 9. If you think about the math for a moment, you can recognize why we bothered to have Corrin take the weaker bronze axe. With the forged one, he would have dealt 5 extra damage over his last 2 rounds of combat, leaving the enemy with only 8 HP. He would have stolen this dual strike from himself. We do want Charlotte to have that unforged bronze axe though, so she takes it now. While she's at it, she can also return the horse spirit.
I'll protect you. Let me try.
Thank you so much.
This adventurer could have attacked Perry from any of 3 different positions. The spot where he actually went, on the opposite side of the mast from Perry, calls for slightly different moves than the other 2 spots. The principles are the same in all cases though. What we're aiming to do is to have Felicia chip this adventurer again, with Perry supporting her, but we'd like to do that in a way that puts Felicia just barely in range of the next adventurer.
Can I have the wishbone? We can do this together.
We also want Benny to be placed in a spot where he can apply Fierce Mien to boost our accuracy. And we want Xander to rally for Felicia, but also be able to dual strike for Kaze, who is going to take the kill. In this instance, the correct sequence starts with Perry. She equips her bronze sword so that she can actually deal some damage, then waits. Now we're looking to drop Benny on the tile opposite the adventurer, where Perry was. He can't go on the diagonal because that would block the only spot where Xander would be able to rally for Felicia and dual strike for Kaze at the same time.
Don't worry yourself.
Xander comes in and rallies now, before Felicia makes her move. With that rally, Felicia has 15 defense and 27 HP. The next adventurer has 39 plus 1 attack, so she can now survive 1 hit. The Hunter's Knife provides a minuscule benefit over the Iron Dagger. It inflicts a luck penalty, so if it hits, the adventurers will have slightly less avoid.
Can I go first? I'm helping.
Quickly now. Shall we? You have my hit. I'm impressed. Remain calm.
Now we're set to take on the other level 6 adventurer. We also have to engage the level 12 one, or else the enemy AI can and will move it to dual strike Felicia and kill her. We'll use Mozu for that. Along the way, she takes Keaton.
No need to worry.
I want to see what happens.
We had Azura sing to Keaton instead of Mozu, just to avoid any possibility that Inspiring Song might make Mozu fast enough to double the adventure. That couldn't have happened anyway because Mozu isn't that fast, but if her growth had gone differently, and perhaps if we had needed to cook a speed boosting meal, that might have been a problem.
Here I am.
Corrin wraps up the turn by just sitting in a position where Azura can heal him.
Sure, why not?
Yay, violence! Oh, ha, mine!
It's time for fairly routine cleanup action as we finish off these two adventurers. Benny steps in to provide Fierce Mian again, and then we do some chip damage before giving the kills to Kaze and Baruka.
All right! Ready to go. We've got this! Me too!
Everything will be all right. We have won.
I'll help you. I'll do my best. Me too! This is my mission. Let me help you. Tough, what are you looking at? That one was mine. Can we do this?
For now, we're done on the southern ship. Let's go north again. These two berserkers are good opponents for Charlotte and Xander to team up against. So Xander comes up, and because Charlotte is a little bit weaker than usual, he borrows the forged bronze axe from Corrin.
I'll try my best.
I believe in you.
Here we go.
Azura sings to Charlotte, improving her accuracy. We want Charlotte to stand shoulder to shoulder with Xander, with the two of them each fighting one berserker, and we want her dual strikes to hit.
Oh, what a
Charlotte
pain in
moves
the
up,
butt.
equips the bronze axe, takes Xander, and switches. Xander equips a Naginata instead of an axe for now because we want to ensure he reaches C rank in lances. He'll use that forged bronze axe later. Charlotte drops off to the left, where only one berserker can reach her. Being a berserker herself, she has a 5-point dodge penalty, which is a problem against enemy berserkers with 18 displayed crit. Fortunately, between Charlotte's 19 luck, the bronze weapon dodge bonus, and Xander's personal 5-point dodge bonus at C support rank, we can completely nullify that crit check.
Stand down.
I'll help, no problem. Pardon me.
The main thing Xander likes about C rank and lances is access to the Blessed Lance. It's terrible for combat, but the automatic healing goes a long way on a unit with as much defense as he has. We've just reached turn 8, and two berserkers have emerged from the bow stairways on the southern ship. One of them is an elite, and we'll try to bait him at max range in the same way as the last elite berserker. But first, we need to clear the flagship. That's a task for Charlotte, who can kill both berserkers if Azura and Xander give her some help.
You have my aid. You have my pity.
Yay, you did it! We can do this. I'm too fragile for this.
Shall we? Don't move!
Ooh, I'm impressed. Well, of course.
We're about to do a fairly complicated shelter singing maneuver. What we want in the end is for Flora to battle the elite berserker on enemy phase, with Corrin supporting her. But we also need to trade Xander's Bronze Axe +1 and Charlotte's Hand Axe +1 over to Corrin. We want Keaton and Mozu to find some space in this area to be ready for next turn. And we'd like to maximize Azura's experience gains from singing in the process. Corrin can retrieve the forged hand axe directly, but we've had to pass the forged bronze axe through Azura, since Corrin can't trade with two different people at the same time. Mozu and Keaton come in as extra bodies to facilitate all the transferring we have to do. Note that this is turn 8, so Profiteer and Collector are disabled. We don't have to ensure that Mozu finishes her action in the lead position.
You have my aid.
Xander can now shelter Azura from the right, outside of enemy range.
It's all right.
Keaton separates Mozu from Corrin, which in turn allows Corrin to separate Flora from Azura.
Let's go.
We want Benny and Baruka to get closer, since they'll help us finish off the Elite Berserker next turn. The other Berserker, the level 6 one, can be fought by Kaze at 1 range.
I'm with you.
Yay, violence! Whoa, whoa, whoa!
We won't give up. I can help too. Yes.
Ready to go. I'm helping.
Kaze can already finish off this Berserker by himself, but we have an opportunity to earn even more experience by bringing Felicia in.
Shall we?
Quickly. I won't allow it. Leave it to me.
What should we do?
Over on our flagship, we have 3 more Berserkers coming aboard. We'll take down the one we've already fought, and then we'll use Xander and Charlotte to engage the next closest one. To get that process started, Charlotte steps over and rallies. That gives Corrin and Flora extra strength, which is needed in order to set up Baruka's kill properly.
I'll protect you.
With Benny's Fierce Mien in place, Corrin lunges the Berserker. The hand axe is the weapon of choice here because after Savage Blow, the bronze axe will reduce the enemy to only 1 HP. That would make it easy for Baruka to kill, of course, but it would deny us a dual strike that could otherwise be used for the final hit.
Don't underestimate me. Maybe I can help.
To make this Berserker's movement consistent, we should deny him any choices.
Here we go.
If Xander were to wait just north or east of where Charlotte is now, then the enemy could attack him from 2 different sides. But if we place Xander a couple spaces north of Charlotte, right up against the starboard side of the boat, there will only be one way for the enemy to attack him. Charlotte takes Azura, but she doesn't switch. We don't want Azura singing to Xander too many times because he has 3 other people he's trying to build support with on this mission. Charlotte, Corrin, and Kaze. The person she will sing to instead is
I'll
Mozu.
protect you. Shall we? Gotta eliminate it.
We prefer to use Mozu's Dual Strike for the kill. That's a little bit better than most other options in terms of optimizing our total XP gains, and it'll help progress Mozu's bow rank. Bow rank isn't really that important, because the best bow in the
How shall
whole
we
game
proceed?
is the holy Bronze Bow +2, peace be upon it. But maybe someday we'll see Mozu wielding the A rank Crescent Bow.
Too slow. Don't interfere.
Yeah, I got you.
I'll help, no problem. This is for you.
Now we have 3 Berserkers to deal with. The 2 elites don't always end up where they are now, since they could potentially also go 1 tile northwest of there, but we can handle either case in essentially the same way. Corrin starts. He flies 4 spaces east of Azura, which should be adjacent to the closer elite, and then he attacks the farther one with 5. Now Corrin is in position to support Flora in an attack on the level 6 Berserker. She trades with Corrin so he can resume his axe training.
We've got this. This is my chance.
We'll feed this kill to Kaze, who can get all the way over here thanks
Show
to
me
Keith.
what you've got.
I guess I'll save your tail.
It's all right.
Kaze will now learn Defender, which is the last paladin skill he cares about. If we weren't about to bench Kaze permanently, now is when it would make sense to change classes again. He could try going through Malignite for even more skills that maximize his damage output, but honestly, the best thing for him to do would be to go right back to Master Ninja.
You have
Azura
my
sings to
support.
Flora because we want Flora to tag team with Corrin over and over.
Oh. I won't lose.
Giving Keaton to Corrin makes his dual strikes a bit stronger, and that'll be important in a moment.
We won't give up. Need a hand?
Can I have the wish ball?
It's all right.
Shall we?
Ready for this? This is my chance.
For Baruka to secure these next 2 kills, we must boost her strength.
Our prey.
Because of all the work that Flora and Corrin put in, Baruka can finish off this Berserker using Kaze's dual strike.
Quickly. I'm healed.
That one was mine.
We're only 1 level away from Trample. We also get D swords on Kaze, so now he can throw the Kodachi.
Shall we?
Can we do this? kill them all.
For the sake of upcoming maneuvers, we'd like Baruka to kill the other Berserker using Keaton's pair-up support and not Corrin's dual strike. Good thing Keaton provides a very nice strength bonus.
Yeah, I got you.
You won't survive this! Ha! Done. It'll be fine.
We're just about halfway through the mission in terms of turn count, but the map is already nearly empty. We certainly don't want to engage the last two enemies early, so we'll be spending a lot of our time swinging our forces back and forth to meet new reinforcements as they arrive. The next of those is a pair of sorcerers emerging from the southern ship at the end of this turn.
I won't fail you. We won't lose. Brace for a chill. I'll try my best.
Benny takes the Blessed Lance, not for himself, but rather for Perry, who needs to heal up a bit so she can fight a sorcerer safely.
I'm with you.
I'll support you.
I am at your service.
After this turn, the ships will move in such a way that if Baruka drops Kaze to the right, he'll be in the perfect spot.
We won't give up. Together.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
The sorcerer on the starboard side is the elite one. The difference isn't as obvious just by looking as it is with the berserkers, because the HP values on the sorcerers aren't far enough apart to give them different color health bars. The healing Perry got from the Blessed Lance has enabled her to survive a counterattack.
We've got trouble. Here's one more.
Let's go.
Corrin lunges from above, pulling the enemy toward Baruka.
Everything will be all right. Allow me.
Let's see what you...
Baruka lunges too, boarding the southern ship as she takes this kill.
I am at your service. If I may.
Don't interfere.
That's all of Baruka's training done. Technically, we went 3 levels beyond what was absolutely required by the rules, but that's a worthy expense when it earns Trample. Trample's 5-point damage bonus is almost universal in Conquest, because there are very few mounted enemies in the last part of the campaign. Only one chapter has a significant number of them, and most have 0, because Hoshidan classes are mainly infantry.
Shall we?
Flora follows her sister's lead in using Perry's dual strike to weaken the second sorcerer. The specific positioning is important here. Putting Felicia east of Perry and Flora south of her allows Kaze to kill the sorcerer from the left side without being adjacent to Felicia.
Looks like we have no choice.
Kaze and Felicia have already teamed up in battle a couple of times, and if they did it again, it would mess up Kaze's support goals. Having Kaze go all the way around to the south side of the enemy would not be great because we want him closer to the bow for shelter purposes later.
I'll do my best.
Fare thee well.
Before reinforcements emerge from the bow of this ship, we have the rest of this turn and 3 more entire turns of downtime. Prepare your mind and body for an absurd amount of shelter singing while we wait.
How troubling.
You're hopeless without me.
I think we can win.
We meet again.
Scary.
Are you scared?
This could be tough.
The 2 sorcerers who just showed up are not worth confronting yet because they're so close to the boss. Now, you may have noticed that we've just moved our whole army away from them, off our flagship and onto the southern ship. As long as we keep it that way, those 2 sorcerers will never move, since there will never be a path connecting all the way from their ship to the southern one.
Ready for this?
Let me help you. Be careful.
Mozu will be Azura's main audience for all the singing she's doing. There are 2 reasons for that. 1, Azura and Mozu don't support each other, so there are no concerns about generating unwanted support points. 2, Mozu's level is sufficiently high relative to Azura's for Azura to get 10 full experience points from singing. We wouldn't want to waste our time having Azura sing to someone like Perry for only 1 experience point, although that kind of thing will sometimes be necessary for tactical reasons. In Perry's case, that's because she's our only shelter user who doesn't support Azura.
I'll go with you.
Everything's okay.
I think I might faint. Don't underestimate me. Out of my way. It'll be fine. Yay, violence!
I want to see what happens.
Now for even more singing.
Let me help you.
While we're at it, we can maneuver our units into the right positions for the next reinforcements. It's distressingly easy to mess this up, and perhaps the easiest way is to forget to make Mozu wait again.
Can we do this?
Luckily, any mistakes that might happen here shouldn't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
Pain in the butt.
Frankly, I don't recommend trying this run at all, but I certainly don't recommend optimizing Azura's singing like this. We're doing this for the sake of maybe getting an extra point of strength on Shigure, and that's about it.
Here I go.
Let's go. I'll protect you.
Hey, it's me.
Have no fear.
Try to pull your weight.
Can I go first? We can do this together. Oh, I won't let you die. I won't fail you. How shall we proceed?
The reinforcements are finally coming at the end of this turn, so we'll put Corrin and Benny in spots where they can instantly apply Heartseeker and Fierce Mien.
I'll support you.
This could be tough, trust me. I'll do my best.
Let's do this.
Scary! I won't let you die.
Everything will be all right.
This is my mission. I'll protect you. I never lose.
Go, go, go!
I won't lose.
Try to pull your weight.
Ready to go. What should we do? I'll go with you.
We don't have to feed any more kills to Baruka. Instead, we can give those to Charlotte and Benny, after a bunch of other people take some potshots.
Everything's okay. You have my pity.
I can support you.
Here I am. I can help too.
We won't lose. Shall we?
We've got this. Let me try.
Let's share this one. How shall we proceed? We'll be fine.
You have my aid. Stand down.
Thank you so much! I'll protect you.
Let us begin. Go, go, go! I'll protect you.
I'll protect you.
Looks like we have no choice.
I'll do my best. Allow me!
I won't fail you.
I believe in you. We're not done yet!
I'll support you.
Show me what you've got. I'm here for you.
We're safe now.
This ship is not yet fully clear. There will be 2 more berserkers in a few turns. But the next wave of reinforcements is a pair of berserkers from the bow of the other ship, so we should move north to greet them. As before, our approach to those northern berserkers will involve Xander engaging the closest one in a controlled way, with Charlotte again supporting him. We only have 3 flyers who can ferry people across to the flagship, so we have to be judicious in selecting which units to send. And we also have to use the right equipment, which is why Benny just returned the bronze axe to Charlotte. Corrin brings Flora, who is useful for her ability to deal minor chip damage and thereby to farm extra experience.
Admit it, you need me.
Veruca carries Charlotte over.
I think I might faint. Must I restrain myself? Be careful.
Lastly, Xander brings Azura. When they fly over and switch, Azura can pass Xander off to Charlotte.
We can win this, right?
No hesitation.
Oh, can I help? Can we do this? Look who's here! Take this! I'll do my best.
Let's go. This is my chance.
Perry has enough range to ride north and finish off that level 6 berserker. She and Benny both still need training. On a map like this one where the enemies are so sparse, it's a lot easier to feed kills to the one who has 8 movement and not 5. Benny's training will come in places with higher enemy density.
You have my kid.
How is my job?
You'll be all right.
This move should look familiar. Because the hand axe +1 increases his damage to an even number, Corrin equips that instead of the bronze axe. Maximizing the power of his dual strikes will help set up a kill for Charlotte. Interestingly, minimizing that damage with an even weaker axe would functionally have the same effect.
I can support you.
I'm here to help.
We're not done yet!
Looks like we have no choice.
I'll protect you. Shall we?
Let's go. I can help too.
Xander moves to attack, again using Corrin's support. We want the Berserker to end up on Corrin's right side in order to make way for Charlotte, so Xander has to lunge to fix the enemy's position.
Don't worry yourself. I believe in you. Let me try.
Corrin has finally earned C rank in axes. Now we can use the Bolt Axe, which is a very good weapon on a magically inclined Malignite with Heartseeker. Backed by Xander's Dual Strike, the Bolt Axe is just strong enough to finish the job.
Let's do this. Stand down.
Ooh, I'm impressed.
You're hopeless without me.
How shall we proceed?
Veruca waits above the sea between the ships. The point of that is to get the sorcerers and adventurers moving by giving them a target they can reach.
I'll do my best.
This is my mission.
Let's go.
There will be one last group of reinforcements from the southern ship at the end of this turn. To prepare for them, we must send our 3 flyers back down. Veruca and Corrin go together.
No mercy.
Don't worry yourself.
Xander shelters Azura so that he too can get refreshed and sent across the sea. He'll bring Charlotte.
Brace for a chill.
You have my aid.
Charlotte gives back the Bronze Axe. Against the incoming Berserkers, Benny wants an accurate weapon that can't crit.
I can help.
Admit it, you need me.
Remain calm.
Can we do this?
I'm with you.
Once again, we're trying to control enemy movement. We can force the forwardmost sorcerer to go to a particular spot with no random choices to make by putting his best target on a direct north-south line from him. Perry can be that target. Mozu and Felicia are less favored because Mozu's counterattack will kill, while Felicia has superior res and Tonebreaker.
Shall we? Me too!
We've successfully lured the sorcerers while cutting off the boss and his fellow adventurer. We'll kill the berserkers and sorcerers now, leaving us free to address the adventurers and the final 2 reinforcements later.
I believe in you.
I think we can win.
I won't lose.
I'll protect you. We're not done yet.
Let us begin.
Xander lunges the starboard berserker. That pulls the enemy off the stairs, which doesn't help with accuracy because it also pulls him away from Corrin's Heartseeker, but does allow Charlotte to come over and kill the enemy using Xander's dual strike.
Here I come!
I see.
Despite his immobility, Benny has slowly been earning his own levels with 1 kill and a large helping of chip damage and dual strikes. He can't go very far, but it's easy for a general to camp spawn points.
No Corrin. You have my pity.
Thank you so much!
Everything will be all right.
Are you scared? You die now!
That attack has gotten Kaze up to level 10.
Leave it to
That's
me.
1 extra level's worth of stats that he might be able to pass down to his kid.
I'm with you.
Corrin attacks the other berserker using Benny's dual strike. He lunges. That way, Benny will be able to run around and finish off the enemy without being adjacent to Corrin.
Have no fear. Stand back! I'll do my best. We won!
Can I have the wishbone?
We already know that as long as she doesn't use the Flame Shuriken, which inflicts a 20-point avoid penalty, Felicia can attack the sorcerers with impunity. But in this case, we want Felicia's attack to kill. She has enough HP to survive even if the sorcerer does hit her, and the Flame Shuriken together with Parry's Steel Sword will deal exactly the right amount of damage.
Let's share this one. That went well! Yes! I won't let you die.
Mozu sets up in a position where she can provide dual strikes.
This is my mission. We can do this together. Not paying attention?
Baruka's attack dealt very little damage. Keaton's Beast Rune can do a lot, setting up a nice kill for Parry.
I'll protect you. Me too. Yay, violence!
Sure, why not? I go Alpha.
Cool.
After all that, Azura sings to Keaton. He heads amidships, where he and Mozu will work together to lure the enemy adventurers away from the 2 berserkers who are about to show up. These are the final enemies, At last, there are no more coming. We'll lure the Berserkers almost the same way we usually have, and that means we need to use the flight services of Xander and Corrin again.
No hesitation. I'm here to help.
We won't lose. Oh,
Let us begin.
shall we? Oh, can I help?
The twist is that this time, rather than parking Xander on the starboard side of our ship with Charlotte dual striking from behind, we'll put Kaze in that position with Corrin supporting. Kaze is not normally built to fight Berserkers, but he can make it work. In fact, we want Kaze to take as much damage as he possibly can without dying, because that's how we make the Berserker attack him and not Keaton.
I'll go with you.
Mozu joins Keaton, who will bait the two adventurers. For that to work properly, Keaton can only move 2 spaces away, and that will keep him in range of the closest Berserker. But as long as the Berserker sees more damage on average against Kaze than against Keaton, that should be fine. The boss will attack Keaton first, and so the Berserker will think he can use the boss's dual strike. If not for that, then there would be no contest. The Berserker would always go for Kaze. The reason Keaton can't go too far is because we need to drag the second adventurer southward onto our ship, as opposed to going west and not actually crossing over. Now that's guaranteed because that enemy can provide a dual strike for the boss adventurer. We have 3 levers to pull to adjust Kaze's bulk. One was his weapon, choosing a lance and not a sword. The second is Xander's rally defense skill, and the other is Felicia's demoiselle. In this particular case, we want the former, but not the latter.
We meet again.
Since we don't want to apply demoiselle, Perry drops Felicia to the right, away from Kaze.
I'll do my best.
Flora and Charlotte go stern. They won't do much next turn, but at least they'll be close enough to assist with shelter singing.
Kill them all. It's alright. You okay?
I'm with you. This is my chance.
We've made it. We can finally end the mission on this turn. We'll continue to feed kills to Perry. If she gets 3, including the Elite Berserker and the boss, she can reach level 5 and finish all her mandatory training right here and now. Baruka lunges the other Berserker from the west, bringing him closer. I actually had to do some improvisation here because in every other case I had ever seen, that Berserker was on the same row as Kaze. Baruka would still use Perry's dual strike, but the difference is that the lunge would bring the enemy north of Perry, not east of her. Anyway, this is Baruka's final act on the battlefield. I've gotten rather fond of her. Objectively, she's not that good as a melee knight, but for our purposes, she's been an absolute workhorse. Flight and lunge and bulk and weak, accurate ranged weapons are wonderful tools.
Remain calm.
Kaze gets one last attack in while teamed up with Xander.
You have my aid. Don't move!
Here we go.
Now that she's been sung to, Perry can finish off the level 12 Berserker. Because the enemy is in the wrong spot, Perry is not able to use Corrin's dual strike for this kill. So I spent some time thinking through this and trying to check whether there was some last minute change I could make to compensate for that. I could not. Corrin will have to go without that experience. It'll probably be fun.
Can I have the wish ball? I win.
Another round of shelter singing is needed to refresh Perry one last time.
It's all right. We'll be fine.
Together.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Ready for this?
Corrin attacks the lesser adventurer. That will set up Keaton and Perry both.
Don't do anything dumb.
Keaton eliminates that adventurer, and once he's done, we can use Perry to kill the boss.
I'll go with you.
I really don't care.
Hey, it's me. Oh, can I help?
Corrin, don't miss. Or on second thought, let's use Keaton.
Go, go, go! I got this!
Whew, that was a long one. I do think it's interesting to navigate back and forth across the ships here, but I'm happy to report that the other shared pair logs have a bit more going on, and I'm also kind of glad that we're not bringing Azura to most of them.
Shigure. I'm sorry.
No.
Hmm? Truly.
Mother,
Ah, what's that? Very well.
My heart is singing. Yes.
You may have guessed our next destination after this trip. We're trekking back through the Hoshidan countryside via the Divine Dragon Forest. Who can say what friends and foes will meet along the way? I'll see you there.